Caro,
Yep.
why would Gold Coast recruit someone like Jamarra Ugle-Hagan when they got plenty of forwards, and clubs like Collingwood are desperate for a forward, went nowhere near him, and now he's dragging not only himself into the headlines but other young players? Like, what's going on up there?
Well, you're talking about the Mac Andrews situation at the State of Origin game last week when they were seen coming out of a disabled bathroom, which I think the coach Damien Hardwick, Bruce, described yesterday as not a good look. Well, they got him for virtually nothing. It's not going to cost them very much money. He didn't cost them much money, and there are a lot of triggers in his deal. In fact, I don't think he's going to meet those triggers this year, but my understanding is the Gold Coast might give him another chance next year. Look, he clearly didn't have a great pre-season. He came to Gold Coast unfit, has not played much senior footy, and has also been injured, didn't play VFL last week.
Calf injury at the moment. Yep.
I think... Gold Coast have said with the McAndrew Jamarra incident, we can only believe them. We can only take them at their word, while also saying it's not a great look. You would hope that Jamarra is doing better than he was last year. To be honest, Bruce, I reckon it's a bit of a miracle that he's playing any level of footy. It's because some of the issues he had last year, and I can quite understand why no other club would take him. There was a view that it might help him to move away from the Melbourne scene. I'm not surprised at all that no Victorian club took him. And let's just hope that as a number one draft pick, he can get his act together. But it's not looking great at the moment. And I can understand why they did it, Pete. Yes, they've got some great young forwards. And I see that Walter re-signed, which is a great fillip for the Gold Coast this week, particularly with King looking that he might be on the way out. But, yeah, let's just watch this space. Very disappointing.
Lee, obviously you're not inside the four walls at People First Stadium, much more closely associated with the Lions. But do you think Jamarra will get a second season with the Suns?
Oh, that's an interesting call. I mean, it's what's going on like behind the scenes down there. We know he's mainly played VFL, therefore he hasn't been able to fight his way into the team in this last couple of months. And I really honestly, you've got to know what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, we know he can be a very talented player. What's he going to be sort of in 27 or even later 26? Yeah, you'd have to be behind the scenes, I reckon, Beaver, to have any thought of whether he's still worthwhile being in your squad of 35 odd.
If you've got strong leadership, you can handle players like that until they. Well, I mean, he obviously had some real problems last year. I mean, there's a view at the AFL, and I know he worked very closely with Laura Kane, who kept a close eye on his rehabilitation. That he's worth persevering with. And, the problem is if he loses football, what happens to Jamarra Ugle-Hagan? So I know the AFL would hope the Gold Coast persists with him, but they do have leadership issues there. I made this point on Tuesday night on Agenda Setters.
Do you mean leadership issues within the playing cohort? You're not suggesting Mark Evans and Damien Hardwick aren't strong leaders? No,
I'm talking about the players. So they've got a very young playing group. They've got a very young captain. He's 23. And they lost some senior experience last year, that I think has obviously hurt them a bit. But I'm not knocking Alex Rance, but I wonder whether they need a stronger leadership program, Bruce, as a result of the situation they find themselves in now. Can we have a listen to what, in fact, Damien Hardwick also said at his press conference yesterday regarding his post-match comments last week?
It was just one of those games. It was so disappointing, and I'm not one of these people that sort of looks at the ladder too much and I just overreact. I apologise to the players because we've still got hope and belief that we can, if we play our best footy, we're capable of beating most sides in the competition. So we spoke about that as a playing group. I apologise to them, and we moved forward pretty quickly.
I'm not sure he needed to apologise to his players, but Lee needed to clarify to his players, didn't he, that he misspoke because of his frustration?
Yeah, bad choice of words. I mean, it was simple as that. It was a bad choice of words, and I think he would have sort of known 5 minutes after or 10 minutes after, just what I say that for. And therefore, of course it might have some effect on... It was just reinforcing to your players. So listen, and it is, while it's mathematically possible, it's possible. So you'd keep pushing. So that was that concept was, the words that slipped out didn't really kind of emphasised that, and pretty quickly I think he would have remedied that situation, certainly with his players, and ultimately next press conference remedy the situation, clarify it all.
Lee and Caro, do you think the coaches should be given, even if it's an extra 20 minutes, should they be given a bit more time post-match before they're required to front the media if it was pushed out to 40 to 45 minutes?
No, I don't. What about you, Lee?
It depends what you're looking for. Well, let's face it, it's like we're in the sports entertainment industry, and having a coach who's like still got a bit of an emotional roller coaster going on, then they might like this. It's good. It's good for the game.
Good theatre.
He said a few words that he'd like to take back. So what you're saying, Caro, every coach would probably say, well, yeah, I prefer to watch the replay before I have to comment on the game. But that's not the way it works, because people want sort of like the hot takes of the coach, and if he's in an emotional state, so much the better.
Would you have ever listened, Lee, to a media boss or your footy boss before? I mean, this is, because some coaches, they want people there who are going to get them in the right frame of mind, to remind them what to say about this, what not to say, to maybe keep a lid on this or that. Did you ever have someone who did that for you?
No. In my two coaching stints, I didn't. You might now. It might be more normal now in football clubs and media departments have got bigger. No, it was, but it always is one of those things. I often say you're trying to actually not to say. You got to say mostly I'm talking to my players, but yes, this is part of talking to the fans through the media. So that's part of what you're doing, and we've all said things. I wish I hadn't said that, but. No, didn't have any external advice on my 20 years of coaching at press or speaking at press conferences post game.
Should we think back to your first stint, Lee, and Caro, when used to be on the beat, you'd surround the coach in the dressing room, with players and well-wishers, and it used to be a circus, didn't it? And there was some quite tasty moments back in, not saying with you, but back in those days, my word, I can still
feel the death stare from Ron Barassi one day when he was coaching Melbourne.
Well, back in the Collingwood days, like the late 80s, early 90s, there wasn't even a media person employed at the club. There was in the Lions days, so it's really it's only a phenomenon of the last couple of generations that you've got a media advisor, or even a football manager who you might have a discussion with before you went to the press conference. It's all pretty logical to do that. But no, I must say it didn't happen in my time.
Brian Myers is someone who had been talked about as a potential departure from Geelong this year. It doesn't sound like that's going to happen anytime soon. We can now listen to what Ross Lyon had to say after the game, Bruce, about Rowan Marshall.
I don't know, what do you think? What do you think of that report? Huh? What do you guys think of that? That's the world we live in. I'm here to talk about an AFL game. And I note that there was a report, and I note that he's contracted. That's the end of it.
So Ross went on to say that people create their own stories. He was frustrated, Lee, with good reason.
Well, it's an interesting situation. I mean, I always thought when Tom De Koning was recruited, you thought, well, it's going to be difficult for Rowan Marshall now because. And they might have had their best games when they've both been available, but I would have thought, Marshall is better if he's the main ruckman, and De Koning's probably better if he's the main ruckman. So you've got a sort of basic problem there. And since De Koning's been gone, I watched St Kilda last week and this week, and Marshall has probably been as influential, certainly the most influential sort of ruck role of the season for St Kilda. I would have thought, Beaver, you take a lot of notice of them. I know the two might have played well with both of them because they can sort of be a big presence up forward. But in terms of just dominating the ruck, the last couple of weeks, Marshall has been outstanding.
He's certainly been outstanding around the ground. I still think St Kilda is a much better side, Lee, with both of them in it, and with TDK's main strength being at the centre bounce and centre bounce clearance, which isn't as strong a suit for Rowan Marshall purely because he's a little bit undersized and he hasn't got much of a leap on him. So I think it has worked really well. It took a little while to gel early in the season, which was understandable, But as they started to get motoring, De Koning will be back next Sunday against North Melbourne, still 8 days away.
Yeah.
And, at the same time, I mean, Marshall has shown his great strength is with his athletic prowess around the ground and when he can engage physically at boundary throw-ins as opposed to the leaping factor at the centre bounce. That's when he comes into his own.
But I would have thought, just simply from the individual's point of view, not the team's point of view, the individual's point of view, I think Rowan Marshall would be enjoying his football more when he's the main man. He's the main ruckman and he doesn't have to share it with De Koning. But nevertheless, not necessarily best for the team, and that always comes first.
So, Lee, Nazaya Wanganeen-Malera was playing his 100th game, had a frustrating night. Thoughts on how he's going, and I suppose you can't help but give the extra scrutiny because of the pay packet, can you?
Well, you do. It's interesting. I kind of one of those things that always hits me is like the value for money. I watched the contest last Sunday when Nate Caddy at Essendon were playing the Lions, and Ty Gallop, who's sort of the second, third year player on fairly minimum money at this point in time, and Nate Caddy would be maybe currently, but is probably next year going to be almost like $1 million player. And you always think about this value for money. I mean, we know that Wanganeen-Malera, he's the only $2 million player in the game, I think. So he's the highest paid player in the game. And it's not so much about him individually. I mean, he's been pretty good. But I find it sort of disturbing that the best players in the game, and they probably are Bonampally, Dacos, Heaney, Gawn, Jackson, Dawson, Lockie Neal. I don't know whether Wanganeen-Malera is currently in the top 5. He's certainly maybe in the close to the top 10. But it always disturbs me that the way our systems work, that the actual best players don't necessarily get. The names I mentioned should be the highest paid players in the game, and they're probably not for a whole lot of circumstances about when they were contracted, when their contract comes up, how the salary cap is moved over the years. But value for money is always an interesting concept, and that's why the Wanganeen-Malera discussion will always be live.
So what was St Kilda meant to do then, Lee? Let him go to one of the South Australian clubs for similar money, or pay him what the market was suggesting at the time he was able to get, whether it was in red, white and black or for one of the suitors?
Yeah, no, St Kilda were locked into probably happy to do it. I'm not saying they had to let him go, Beaver. All I'm saying, it's a bit like the value for money concept. And I sometimes ask myself the question on that. Now, this is not about Wanganeen-Malera so much. But if wages, player salaries were totally public, would they be closer to the best players getting the absolute top dollar? Because everyone would know what everyone's getting, and maybe, because at the moment, I just don't know whether that the best players getting the top dollar is actually happening right now.
But Lee, obviously, that's got a lot to do with the fact, and you saw this when you were coaching Brisbane and also at your time at Hawthorn. Some clubs have to pay more to get the good players because they're not good clubs. I mean, you stay at Brisbane for less. Patrick Dangerfield chose to go to a club where he knew he wasn't going to earn the money he might have earned if he'd gone to North Melbourne, but he wanted to play at Geelong, where they were winning premierships at the time and they were finishing top 4 most years. So that they had to pay other players to remain at the top. And didn't you say that to your Brisbane players at one point? That
No, exactly what you're saying applies. I mean, when you've got the salary cap, you've got a really good team, then if everyone wants their market value, you can't keep them all. I mean, that's the basic issue. And some players, rightly, I think, saying, no, I'd prefer to play in the team in the premiership window and get 10% less. But anyway, it's just as always the value for money part of it is always something that pops into my mind. As I say, the Gallop Caddy one was a sort of massive one. Gallop probably beat Caddy in the contest, but in the next period of time, Caddy's going to be sort of getting heaps more than Ty Gallop.